Hello, how are you?
Okay, so we are Game Changers, and we're doing our first ever blab as part of the Disruptive Media Learning Lab. Today we have Anjay here in Coventry. We have Maha, two Mahas, both in Egypt and Mark in New Zealand, staying up late for us ever so kindly. So we are about to have a disruptive bite style, which is one of the series that we have in the lab. And the idea is that everybody gets about 10 minutes each to talk about their experiences and their thoughts at this point about games in learning. And then after each 10 minutes, or after all of the 10 minutes rather, we're going to have a bit of a free-for-all discussion. So anybody joining us online, you can talk in the chat box or join us on Twitter with the hashtag #GChangers. So I'm going to be looking at that, juggling quite a lot. But should we just do a quick round of introduction? So I'm Kate Green. I work here in the Disruptive Media Learning Lab as a project and community assistant. I'm the community developer and manager for the Game Changers program that we have. And I've also co-authored the Open Education Stand for Game Changers. I'll just pass over to Anjay, who is mic'd up as well.
Hello, I'm Anjay. I work for a company called G2G3, which does gamification, serious games and simulations. I've been working in gamification now for around about 5 years, researching and creating gamified experiences. Previous to that, I was a web developer, worked in e-learning for a while, biomedical science for a bit, so a bit of jack of all trades.
Maha? One of them?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I am originally not in the mainstream education. I'm a trainer, coach, and I call myself instructional designer because I do all the designing for myself and for others of courses and programs, learning programs, usually in the corporate world, but also I volunteer as a teacher of English and some of the NGOs. That's me. I'm in Cairo, Egypt, after 23 years of being abroad.
I'm Maha Bali. I'm an associate professor of practice at the American University in Cairo. I'm a faculty developer mainly, but I also teach a creativity course which has a module on educational game design. And I live online. I'm in Cairo, but I live online.
I'll jump in here. I'm Mark McGuire. I'm initially from Toronto, Canada, but I've been in Dunedin, New Zealand for just over 20 years, where I've been teaching design at the University of Otago. Pretty much a generalist. I teach communication design, design for innovation, experience design, and open network design. My background was in architecture, fine art, information science, and my PhD was in media studies, where I looked at simulated communities and the design of online social spaces. And that was largely about game design, I suppose.
Great. So I am going old school, but still trying to gamify this a little bit. So I've got a timer. So when it goes, there's going to be an alarm that goes off every 10 minutes. So I don't know who wants to go first with their thoughts and ideas about games and learning.
Can I volunteer, Mark?
I'll go.
I'll second Mark. That's a good idea.
I won't need 10 minutes. I think 10 minutes is a bit long, but I can tell you what I've been doing in terms of integrating gaming and game design in my teaching and why I think it's useful. We've used games as a way of designing experience in experience design. A couple of years ago, we had our students design a game for understanding and learning about the Maori language, the Aboriginal language taught and spoken here in New Zealand. And that involved students working on a physical game, a board game or a physical game, and then translating that idea into an app. And in the end, we had the winning group worked with us over the summer to realize an app that's now in the App Store called Aki, AKI, which is a language learning app. I think from my perspective, gaming is interesting both as an enjoyable pastime and something that you can do for entertainment, but even more so in terms of education because it allows us to see things in a way that we otherwise have difficulty seeing. And in design, we still try to encourage people to draw, because drawing is as much about seeing as it is about creating something that you have as a result of that activity. When you draw something, you're forced to look at every detail of something in order to get it all down on paper. The same when you model something in 3D with your hands, you learn about the three-dimensional space, and you can understand an object in all its 3D substantive form when you're modeling in 3D space. And your hands move in a way that works with the brain to help you understand and embody what's going on with 3D objects. Simulations are also useful because they help us to understand, when you make a simulation, to understand relationships between things and as they change over time. Some games, of course, are simulations, the whole Sim City and Sim Earth and that series that were very popular several years ago. So designing a simulation is a useful way of coming to terms with how complex systems work. Designing a game inserts the person or the human into a system. So through the design of a game, we come to terms with how humans behave in a system over time. So in a sense, we're understanding something about social behavior and social spaces, and the way that the design of these spaces influence and affect human decisions and their outcomes. So I think one way of understanding otherwise complex situations and environments is to, in a sense, render them in the form of a game. And one game that we all talk about, that we all play, and that we're all familiar with, is the game of education, the game of teaching and learning. What we do when we're with students in a classroom, or what we do at our institutions. We play games all the time, even when we don't realize that we're playing games. And students and staff know what the games are that they're playing. We know what constitutes the victory condition and the solution and the objective. And we find shortcuts and we work out how to win in our own terms, on our own terms. So I think when we teach, I like to tell the students that in the first lecture, that the first thing we have to address and foreground and talk about is the lecture theater, the context for the game that we're here to play, the way that situation, the schedules, the lecture theater, the form of the lecture, the tutorials, the way that we interact with our students and the way that we assess their work, all of that is part of the game that they learn to understand through their time in higher education. And we as teachers learn how to game the system as well. We know what rewards we can get for certain kinds of activities. We know how to get a job, how to keep a job, and how to lose our jobs. And the students are playing their game, we're playing a somewhat different game, and then when we enter the same space in a classroom or a meeting room or even somewhere between the buildings on campus, we play a different game, a game that we negotiate between the two of us, or many if we're in a lecture theater. So I think the design of games is a useful way for us to foreground and come to a better understanding of the kind of situations that we find ourselves in everyday life, including what we do in education and learning in higher education. I'll stop there.
Great, plenty of time left. So who's next? You've had 5 minutes.
Yeah, I can manage 5 minutes. I think I'm good for that. So I come at this from a slightly different angle, because obviously I'm not directly involved in education. I'm more from industry and commercial. However, my sort of experience of using games in education goes back to when I was a child, which is some 30-something years ago, because I used to play times tables games, things like that. So from an early age, I knew that games were a good way of teaching. Teachers didn't know that. They weren't allowed to play with that kind of thing. They had syllabuses they had to stick with. Fast forward to when I was working in education 8 years ago, we were having to get across very complicated ideas in ways that made people engaged and made them interested in what we were trying to tell them. It was all about engineering, was what I was working with. And I was designing kind of games feeling environment. So it wasn't a game. There was no gameplay as such, but it had a game-like feel to it. So simple ways of using animations. Back when Flash was popular, everyone was doing everything in Flash online. Come down to now, and I understand why that worked. So games are really good at explaining complex systems because they break them down into their component parts and kind of strip back all of the nonsense around the system and give it its core experience. Which is why games are so interesting. You look at any game online, it's not real life. It doesn't explain real life, but it does explain bits of real life. It does give you an experience that's similar to real life, but focused on particular parts the game designer wanted you to focus on. Now, if you look at gamification pure, which is where I sit these days, is using gamification to create more engaging experiences around really quite dull subjects like core learning for businesses, their sustainability programs, that kind of thing. You're not trying to make a game around it. What you're trying to do is take ideas from games and things that have made games interesting for people in the past and make things almost bearable. Sometimes it's not about making it fun. It's not about making it really enjoyable. It's about making it better, slightly less difficult to get involved with. One of the concepts I was trying to explain to a client recently was that one of the things games do extremely well is break you out of the reality of the situation and give you a safe place to try things and to experiment a bit more and to feel like you're allowed to fail. And something Mark was saying there, we all know how to get fired. Now, one of the ways of getting fired and losing a job is by failing on a regular basis. In a game, failure is actually quite preferable because if you fail, you've learned something. The trick is to fail and then understand why you failed. And where jobs are really bad at doing that is when you fail, the first thing that happens is you're punished. With a game, when you fail, what happens is you kind of get some feedback on why you failed. If you look at Call of Duty, you get someone gives a really good shot and takes you out. It zooms back to show you where you were shot from. So you get to learn where the best place was to be the next time. Education does it really well. I've got two children, one's 4, one's 8. The 8-year-old is at the point where she gets a bit of homework now. If she fails, she's given feedback on why she failed and how she can improve upon it. So that's one of the things you try and bring into business now with gamification is this idea that, something didn't go right, but here's why it didn't go right. One of the frustrations I have in business is we have very slow feedback cycles. So anyone who's had a job of any description will know that your feedback cycle is potentially up to a year. You sit at the end of the year, you do your yearly feedback, you try and remember what projects you worked on that year, you talk to people you may or may not have worked with who may have some vague understanding of who you are and ask them for feedback. In games, feedback is instant. Mario runs through his playing field, he jumps on the mushroom, it dies. Obviously, without context, that's a weird thing, jumping on mushrooms just to kill them. But anyway, when you look at bringing that into real life, you're looking at gamified systems. Now, people say, well, that's points and badges. Maybe it is, but it's feedback. It's giving you that understanding that you've done something. Here's what you did. Here's what it was worth to us for you doing that. If you fail, you get that feedback straight away and you can improve upon it rather than waiting 6 months to find that at the end of the project, something you did 6 months ago was a problem and it's knocked on constantly for 6 months. And again, this is just learning stuff that games have been doing for years, that education has been doing for years. Education, as you say, you understand the game, you know the rules, and you're given feedback on a regular basis. In the industry, we all understand the rules. We're all playing the same game. We're all going through it. We learn something, we take that knowledge and we do something with it. But because we're not given the feedback quick enough, we often don't know how to improve upon it. And this is why we get stuck in these cycles of doing the same thing wrong over and over and over again. All you have to do is look at banks to see they're given the rewards for the wrong things. They go through a cycle of being rewarded for the wrong thing constantly, and you get financial crashes. Industry is no different. Education is no different. If you're constantly doing the wrong thing and still getting rewarded or not getting the feedback to say you've done the wrong thing, you end up just going through a perpetual cycle, which is why I love games, because I think you can translate that game thinking into anywhere. Constant feedback, relevant feedback, feedback in time, and goals Often you're not given that goal. You've got your qualification. Here's the world. Go and do something. What? Give me some idea to know what I'm working towards. Then when I've hit that, let me work towards something else. Give me those levels. Give me those quests. So that's where I think games really can improve everything. Feedback, goals, quests, understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, and where you're heading towards. That'll do me.
Perfect. Who's next?
I can go next, if that's okay with everybody. Okay. So I don't have that expertise about games specifically or about design. I have an undergraduate degree in computer science where I did nothing that was gaming, and then I did a master's and PhD in education. So I know a lot more about education than gaming, and the first time I had to teach educational game design, I was sort of learning with my students, which was kind of good because I ended up not giving them too much guidance and watching them grow. And I think teaching educational game design is useful in a lot of ways, in the sense that because the topic is games, it's easier to ask students to sort of, question authority and do things differently versus if they were designing something that they think of as more serious. It's easier to do things like hacking. So one of the things I do with them at the beginning is to ask them to hack existing games. And they won't feel like they're doing something rude because it's a game, versus if you ask them to hack like the design of something that's much more serious for them. And I also try to help them question the way games usually are. So we look at a lot of different games and what they have in common, what they have different. And we question whether games have to be competitive or whether we could create cooperative games. And when I get a student who says, you can't have a game that's fun, that's not competitive, I ask them, well, your final project has to be a non-competitive game. And I love it what comes out when I do that to them. And I think, I liked what Mark said earlier about drawing as a way of seeing, not just creating something. And I think as students work on creating a game, they learn a lot about what they're going to do the game about, and they learn a lot about the people that they're working with. So they learn about design thinking in the first module of my course. So they learn about empathy and designing things for the user, and learning about what it is they're actually going to do for the user. And so it gives them an opportunity, because the class is not about a particular subject, but about game design, gives them an opportunity to learn more about something they care about, and to create an educational game that they advocate for about something that they care about, and gives them that freedom within that just frame of an educational game design that they have to do. We have someone in the audience, Terry Elliott, who's inspired me a lot in what I do in my courses, because as I blog about what I do in my class, Terry suggested to me that I ask my students to, at the end of the semester, not just present their game. I let them present their game in public, but he also suggested that they create a making of the game video or artifact or whatever, and that process of narrating their game and reflecting on it in itself is, for me, because I'm more interested in their learning than in the actual game they come up with, this has helped me focus on that and help the students focus on their own process and reflecting and metacognition, what it is they've learned creating the game and how they would have done it differently, and what it was in that process that they learned that they could take further outside of the class. I was just going to say one other thing about this failure thing. Is definitely one of the most important things, not only when you're playing a game, but also when you're designing a game. We're going to talk about this again. Is it next week that we're talking about prototypes? Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, failure should be part of prototyping as well as you design a game and try to improve it. And as someone who has a 4-year-old child, I think she learns a lot by failing all the time. And she pushes me to make a lot of things into games that I wouldn't normally make into a game. Like, you'd think you could do something pretty straightforward with a 4-year-old, but doesn't work usually until you make it really, really fun. So I'm going to stop here and leave it to someone else. I might have to leave a little bit early, but hopefully I'll stay as long as I can. Thank you.
Great, Maha. So we can finish off with the second Maha, and then we can just open up to questions that are in the chat and also on the floor here. So, Maha, take it away.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry because I can't see myself and the screen is not clear. Anyway, so yeah, I think I'll start from my professional work as a trainer. We called what we used in a face-to-face training situation as games. I later, when I mean last year, I attended a course about gamification. I think it was with Coursera, one of the Coursera courses, and I discovered that I mean, using what we learn from games into other situations that are not games is called gamification. At least that's that was the course's or that professor's opinion about what gamification is or isn't. Because I've come across people who, when they use the word gamification, they are talking about making the learning or the work as a game. I mean, they actually create full-blown games, or they use actual games in whatever they're doing. While the gamification that I learned on that course was about taking elements from the game, from games, and using them without actually calling them a game at all. I mean, the simplest or the most superficial, perhaps, would be the champion boards or the points and so on. My experience as a trainer, we use what we called games or play. I mean, we avoided the word games because in the professional world, when you get managers or supervisors or senior managers in a class, and they don't want the word game to to come up, or they feel that you are wasting their time. So it was called activities, but they were game-like, and not even as a game-like, play-like, simulating reality. And why I'm saying that they're not full-blown games, because also on another course in that I took with MIT, I discovered that there is, or at least one definition of games. One of it is that you can that it has levels, that you can play it over and over and still enjoy it and learn something or do something different with it. I think what we did in classrooms or face-to-face most probably was a one-off thing. That we use activities that I wouldn't try to repeat with the same group again, because it'll be, you know, like already known, burnt, and so on. Also, one of the things that I started, I mean, later in 2012, I attended a course called Teaching and Learning in Virtual Worlds, and one part of that was to try as an option experimenting with video games. So I went into one of the big video games. I don't know if it's okay to mention the name or not, but it's is it okay or not? Anyway, so it's a video game. It's an online video game, one of the multiplayer games, and as I discovered that some educators use it in classes or in schools, and I looked. I mean, in the course, I learned a lot about what educators are looking at for in using games. But to be honest, I have a different way of looking at it. You don't have to have a full-blown game. You don't have to have a real game that people can actually level through and so on for the game to work in education. What I've heard so far from the others is about actually the fun part, the simulation part, the trying things where in a safe situation where you failing is not a problem. I think that's the idea. For example, in the corporate world, when we used what we called games, we actually created things from thin air or from an existing game that we adapted to the classroom. And I'll give an example. I used a puzzle just for a very short to play a game or to show the participants how it feels when you don't understand or know the vision, when you don't understand where you're headed, what are you trying to create. And it may work. I mean, people may have other ideas or different opinions about the usage of or use of that particular activity, but that at that point of time that worked. People were frustrated that they couldn't see the picture, that they didn't understand what they were creating, and so on. And also that I divided the puzzle pieces amongst the groups, so they didn't have the full a full set. So they had to communicate and understand each other's parts and exchange each other's parts. That was something that I actually just thought of doing, because I wanted them to see that in an organization you need to understand where you're headed, what you're trying to create together, and also that each department, when they work completely separated in silos on their own, you're missing a lot. There are a lot of pieces that are missing, and so on. So I also draw from the world of sports. I used to play sports when I was younger, and also playing in a group and in a team as that also is a game. I'm sorry. I'm just. There are so many things that I'm trying to bring in at the same time, and perhaps I'm a bit nervous. But anyways, what I wanted to say is that I don't, in my opinion, it is play and not necessarily games with fixed rules and leveling that actually make a difference. It is the safe environment. It is the trial and error. And learning from your mistakes in whichever activity. And as long as people, as somebody just mentioned, is detached from I am doing work or I'm studying. They start letting go and enjoying, and in whichever way, and then they learn from that by discussing it or by actually reflecting on it, and so on. Games are not always good. I play the video game, and yes, it gives a lot of feedback and instant feedback, but I think different players get different feedback, or they see the feedback in different ways. So what you learn from that and how you choose to continue is also or continue with is also different. The behaviors there's a big range of different types of behaviors and play styles that are not necessarily useful for everybody or productive for everybody. So it is not just throwing people into a game. I think it's the discussions and reflections and talking about what happens in the game. And I think I'll stop here.
So I guess now it's a great chance that we can just kind of have a bit of a free-for-all. So I don't know if anybody here has sort of anything, comments or anything they want to, or anybody can just go. But I guess for me, what was the really poignant things that were coming out of that was this idea that we can fail in games, and how we kind of move that into learning is challenging with how the institutions are. but it's something that we should definitely try and kind of persevere with, especially with something like game changes. We do have the ability to at least try and start chipping away at those walls. And then there's the time for me, apparently. So there's this idea of failure and how we need to kind of get maybe the institution to think a bit more carefully about that, because when we move out from being students into the real world, I mean, we are going to fail at some point. It's just being able to kind of understand that it's okay to do that. I mean, not too much, so much that we get fired. We probably should look at something different to do, but there should still be that kind of safeguarding. But I don't know if anybody else had picked up anything else that came out of that conversation and wanted to share. I've got the mic.
Like, it's just the interesting conversation about feedback, and I think that's one thing that games do so well, is that not only can we do that with the visual, so we're constantly providing visual feedback through the assets and animation on screen, but we can do it through audio, which is another powerful motivator in games. And then also at the educational level, we can put in the formative and summative feedback, which of course is really important when we're talking about education. So I think that from what you guys have discussed today, it's incredibly important for designing serious games. And that's just me.
That was Sam, by the way. You can't see her on the webcam. She's gone away. There she is.
No.
If you guys want to just chip in, I don't know if anybody else has anything. Oh, I got Ian. Sorry.
I'll sit here so I can be seen. This is the first one of these I've actually sat in, and I must admit, listening, very, very excited on some aspects, absolutely terrified on others with some of the views and stuff that I've heard going around. Sorry, is that all right? You put your hand up there. No, it's all right, it's the sun dazzling you out. I mean, for me, what was really interesting about the conversations there was this whole notion of game, and what worries me a little bit is I'm hearing games sort of put up there like this sort of aspirational thing. But then on the other hand, what I'm not hearing is deconstruction of what a game is. And, you know, I'm thinking some of the stuff we've been talking about, you could align very clearly with behaviorism. And there's a lot of people who, you know, play gambling machines. And having been involved with that, you realize just how motivational these are, but in a very, very particular way. On the other hand, or the other end of this spectrum, I've been very, very involved with virtual collaborative environments where people can step into and not actually be themselves, although they are themselves, operate socially, work to construct things together, and actually they can fail, they can not fail, they can be successful, they can be marked. But again, it's completely the other end of the spectrum where we end up with a very sort of social constructivist kind of environment, which in some educational terms will be seen as very, very positive. And so really the big takeaway for me from this has been about, it sounds to me as if one needs to perhaps think about what the notion of game is. I was looking, when somebody mentioned the word play, which I'd be very plus for normally, I actually Googled it, and it sort of said something taking part in not a serious activity, which, again, that's wrong, I think, but there we go. But this, to sum it up and sort of lower it right down, I think it would be really interesting perhaps to come up with some sort of definition of these spaces that you're talking about. And maybe that may be a place that's safe, somewhere where people can grow, but perhaps where some people can be challenged. So somewhere that's safe and that you can be challenged.
Yeah.
Which one?
Which one? Well, thank you. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Bye-bye.
No. Just a response is construction which has a series of rules, whereas play doesn't really have any rules, and I think that's the difference. And there's been so much research done on, you know, when you kind of get into the academic side of serious games, then yes, what is game? What is play? How do we define that? And how do we break that down? And I think that it's really interesting because what you were saying, that yes, it does have the behaviorist elements, but also a very constructivist approach. And I think the what we try and strive for is to, yes, we want them to respond to the reward system within games, which is the behaviorist, but we want to kind of inspire that intrinsic motivation, which is then follows that. Yeah, it's kind of that's the paradigm that we're kind of aiming for. So,
can I jump in to ask something? I don't know if it's. I think Kate, was it you guys who showed Jane McGonigal video to the people on Game Changers, or was it someone else? Was it you guys? So when I watched that TED talk by her, it feels very hyperbolic. And I keep thinking, how could you be saying that? And so I'm going back to this, this sort of taking a critical view to games. First of all, not all games are the same. So we can't say one thing and say all games are blah, blah, blah. They help learning in that way. That does not make any sense whatsoever. It's not, I don't even think it's good social research to ever talk about something in such a generalized way. And I think there isn't enough, there's a little bit, but not enough critique of serious games that do that. There's a lot of, it's still like, the MOOCs that went through the cycle of hyperbole. I think we're still sort of in that cycle for games. There's some people who won't touch them, and there's some people who are just really into games and gamification, which are different things too, and different from play, obviously. And I think like the value of play in its unstructured, especially for children, is I think probably proven very well in all kinds of fields. Versus games that you can't really say anything about games in general. And one of the things that we'll probably talk about again next week is just that when you say a game teaches something, do you then go to prove that that thing is taught and sustained beyond playing that game for that whatever period of time the person is playing it and has a long-term effect more than some other way of teaching the same thing or of learning the same thing. So, I agree that we should take a more critical view of what we mean when we say games.
Can I jump in as well? I think it's useful to really question the language that we're using, because once we say the word game or the word play, all sorts of associations come to the forefront, and other things are excluded, other possibilities, other ways of seeing what's in front of us are no longer available because the language drags with it all sorts of baggage. The same with words like community. So we hear about online communities, and what we're really talking about are privately owned, venture capital funded businesses that simulate a community when really there's no community there at all. There's just a game that has no victory condition, where the owners supply the space, the rules, and the tools, and we as the players come in, provide all the value, and they find a way of getting it out. So when we use terms like game or like community, it often makes something that's not very innocent at all seem like play, when really there's something very different going on.
You have to look at all of this when you're looking at it from a corporate perspective. I've got my own. The behaviorism thing is really interesting, because what you have to look at is for everything that's good, there's bad. So normally, I would say. So we can say, and people like me say, oh, games are amazing, but we also have to accept that games can also be incredibly bad. Addiction. In the games industry, you get told off if you mention the word addiction. We don't talk about addicting games. But the research is so inconclusive around whether it's addictive or not. It depends on who's done the research and I'm talking about the corporate kind of needs. Some people will say games are addictive. Some people will say that they're not, that people who get addictive have addictive personalities. In reality, it's just a tool. Games, gamification, serious games, it's like having a chainsaw. A chainsaw is really useful if you're in the woods and need to cut down trees. If you're in the middle of a mall and you have a chainsaw, it's probably a bad thing. So it just comes down to how you're using it and what your intent is for it. If you're a Candy Crush, and your intent is to generate as much money as possible from people playing Candy Crush, then you can probably say that whilst the game might be fun, there's probably a very negative impact on people. If you look at a game like Minecraft, where actually, once you've got it, education, they're giving Minecraft away really cheaply or for free, depending on what the institution is. There's very, very little negative impact if you use it properly. It gives you that big free playground to try and experiment in. It gives you the chance to play and build things. Both my daughters, 4 and 8, they both play on my server at home on their tablets, and they have great fun. If I take it away from them, the 4-year-old goes insane. So there's obviously a negative impact on her somewhere in the psyche. The 8-year-old is that bit older and can say, okay, fine, it's the end of my time. We've instigated marble jars, the great extrinsic motivator for good behavior. I've tried and failed with reward charts and all these sort of things. It comes down to how you're using these, how you use the tools. If you're focusing on the intrinsic motivations or the extrinsic rewards, and these are all big buzzwords that are being used all around the industry. And as you say, things aren't broken down into simple terms. If you are just working towards getting the reward, is that good? Well, I've got a job. Now, I work every day because I need to pay my mortgage. Is that an extrinsic reward? Of course it is. Would I go to work day to day if I didn't have a mortgage to pay? Probably not. But there are intrinsic things within my job that I really enjoy. And I'm lucky with that. Not everyone has that. So it's finding this balance. It's using the right tools at the right times. And if you start diving down into the academic descriptions of games, you have... I did a year's worth of research on playing games, and I came out knowing less than I did when I started, because there are so many people who have tried to define it. There's so many people who have defined play, and you look at it and go, well, that's really a game. And you just describe a game and go, well, that's just play. And you have to stop and say, these are where I'm going to break my lines down. These are all just one big tool, one big group of tools to help you achieve a goal. And if you define that goal, great. If you haven't defined that goal, then you start falling apart.
Okay, can I jump in as well? One of the things that I've been hearing is looking at games in the sense of win and lose. I mean, games that will allow a player to win or lose, and which means again that we're looking at more extrinsic motivations. In the gamification. I mean, what I've learned looking at gamification in that course, at least, I mean, it was an eye opener because it was more in alignment with what I've been used to in the corporate world. We never use games or activities with a win or lose. This is one thing. We always try to make them a playful situations that will allow the players at the end, when we debrief or when we unpack what happened, to learn something about their behavior, about something to learn something about their motivations, about how would they do it in another situation, or how would they change if it wasn't a good way of behavior, or a good way, or it wasn't getting them what they wanted. Also, I don't know why. I mean, I understand that when we look at games like, for example, Minecraft or World of Warcraft or whatever, they're completely different. One is very, very. I think it's World of Warcraft is a game. I cannot describe it in any other way. It has rules. It has leveling. It has a lot of rewards. But in something like Minecraft, that's a sandbox. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You can create whatever you want. You can interact in any way that you like. So I generally prefer to put people in situations that are not too restrictive when we're playing games. That is not very limited to extrinsic rewards. That they have to get the right gear or the number of points or to get to a certain level and so on, because I think it backfires And I'm seeing that in World of Warcraft. I mean, I don't play World of Warcraft without thinking about organizations. I cannot. I never play it without thinking about organizations and without thinking about performance management, for example, as one of the things that is a problem. And you've already mentioned it. There are things that we can learn from games that we can use, but I think that they are very risky. I mean, if you think that on their own they are educational, that is also a very risky thing to go into or to adopt as an idea. Even Minecraft, I was just 5 minutes ago, or just before I joined you, I was being interviewed by someone who was doing a research about learning communities in Second Life. And in a particular community that I've been part of since 2009. And we talked about Second Life, and we also talked about Minecraft. And in some cases, it's very cultural, and it's how to do you set up the activity. And I don't like to call them games anymore. I've been through that a lot, and I think it is better to call them activities. That's my opinion. For example, what worked for some people in Minecraft, if people from the West, from Europe, and from the States, doesn't seem to have worked with people from Japan. Learning the same thing. They gave up, they left it, they were not interested, and they felt that this is not the kind of thing that they should even be seen doing. The same thing about Second Life and activity in Second Life, although they were very benign and very safe and very respectable, but they didn't want to be seen as doing something like that, as being communicating with people in Second Life or in Minecraft, and they found it very boring.
I just want to add a bit more stuff on what you were saying. I believe that in terms of extrinsic and intrinsic, they are influenced by cultural sort of background, psychology, and all sorts of different things that we can think about, which would influence your choice of what would motivate you. But I believe that extrinsics can actually nurture intrinsics. For example, like the simplest example is Fitbit or Nike Plus. Fitbit is like you would engage with the environment. You want to compete with your own targets. Perhaps you will compete with your friends, and you want to show off on social platforms, and then you have done this number of miles per day type thing. But in doing so, you would discover your own intrinsic motivation. As a runner, you would discover your runner's high, and you discover you actually enjoy doing it. And the more you do it, you would do it for the sake of it rather than being motivated by the app. And I've seen friends who get so addicted to running, but when they first started, they didn't actually want to do it, but because 3 of them got Fitbit for Christmas, they said let's just do this and then compete and see who could actually do a run like the most type thing. But all 3 of them now, they loved running. They said that Fitbit doesn't actually motivate them to run. It's because they've discovered their runner's high. They like to reach a position where they found, oh my God, I've got this energy that I can actually run more than I should. But I think three of them are overdoing it in terms of being addictive, and they've lost too much weight. So we are trying to get them off it, off running, because they enjoy it so much. That they're sort of overdoing it, I think. So it's the same as games as well. It's the balance and the context of how you want to use games in learning. It should not be the only means of learning that you use in your classroom perhaps, but it should be a part of the whole ecosystem, because different people would react and would engage with different resources differently.
I agree, and I thank you for that, because perhaps what I mean, in short, it is not the solution for everything, neither in learning or in the corporate world, to gamify stuff or to make everything into a game.
Can I
Yes.
jump in? Hi, I'm Luca. I wanted
Hello.
to say we are talking a lot about using games, and it's good. They work in a way, but isn't it a bit dangerous to only use games? We are saying of using tools, but I can use a painting from Picasso to shield myself from the rain, or I can use a cinema projector to illuminate a room, but I would be missing a good part. I mean, games are a cultural thing, and they are extremely good tools, but they are not only tools. If we forget they are also a way of expression, we risk losing a lot of our humanity, I think, even. Was it too much?
No, absolutely. Actually, I love games, and I love games for learning and for development. I think they are very, very valuable. But you're right. And what I'm actually saying is that it is not a solution that we just can dump into, as you were saying, all of you. You cannot just put it in a classroom or in a corporate training and it solves the problem. It doesn't work that way. And I think that, yes, while we're designing, I like the word play more than games, actually. I think it includes games, but it includes also a lot of other things.
That's a really lovely way to finish, I think. So we've just got to about 12:30 here in Coventry. Thank you ever so much. Maha's just left, but Maha too. And Mark as well. Thank you for staying up super late for us. And also thanks to Anjay, who has come up from London to see us as well today. So thanks, everybody. We're going to wrap up here now, but see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.